You know, Liberty Mutual Insurance customizes car insurance so you only pay for what you need. You know what? Honestly, that's all we really want. You know, fairness. We want it in sports, we want it in life, to all be treated fairly. And what's more fair than having you only pay for what you need? Way to go, Liberty Mutual. This message was brought to you by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. Visit libertymutual.com to learn more.
You know what I want? I want to talk
Hello and welcome to the Raptors Republic weekly podcast. This one breaking down what happened at the draft, how we feel about it, and what it might mean for the future. Guest today, a very special one, his third time on since the draft cycle started. If you can get the best, you get them. There'll be a diverse set of voices talking about a lot of the Raptors moves, but PD Webb, Director of Research and Development with Cerebro, and writer on Patreon, and a lot of people love it. Let's Watch Film on YouTube. You can find that at PD Webb. Just type that in, PD space Webb. Mr. Webb, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing really well. This is, the calm before the storm that is the 2022 draft cycle. I give myself a couple days where you just kind of reflect, take it easy, do a couple podcasts, think about the draft that happened, kind of think about mistakes you made or trying to understand what teams did and their thought process, because that's always big scouting the next cycle. This is one of my calmest times of the year, but thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to talk about one of the most influential picks in the draft and also two interesting second round picks as well. This is a fun one.
Mm-hmm. Paolo Banchero, is he your guy right now?
I don't have a number one yet. I've bounced between a couple of different guys. I have long been a AJ Griffin number one person, but I also haven't seen him play basketball in a competitive setting in almost 2 years. So that's a difficult one to keep number one. So I similar to last year where I kind of had like Cade and then just like an osmosis of question marks around Evan Mobley. I kind of have Banchero roughly one, but the same, like if AJ Griffin looks approximately on the same development track, like that's probably my number one. But we'll see them play for the same team next year. So
proving ground. Okay, so Blake Murphy, mutual friend of ours. It's shortly after the lottery, The Athletic did a mock draft, and he chose Scottie Barnes at 4, and he cited his reasoning as, well, I wanted to produce it as a thought experiment and see what happens if Scottie goes 4. Everybody's mocking 1, 2, 3, 4 with Cade, Green, Mobley, and Suggs. So he popped Barnes in there. As it turns out, after everybody gave him a bunch of crap and was like, this is unrealistic, why would you do this? You've ruined my life. Scottie Barnes goes 4. Just cliff notes. What are your thoughts on Barnes at 4?
I think it's a really interesting process. I think that there was an initial reaction that like this was a reach or that this was an unconventional choice. I think that also comes from the, I would say, misinterpretation of Jalen Suggs as like a primary. I've always interpreted him as a connecting piece, sort of like a not entirely, different, but in the same idea of Tyrese Haliburton, where he can struggle to get to his spots on his own. He's best playing within a system that creates a certain amount of angles and looks for him, and playing next to another creator. If you see him as that, like he's not necessarily a guarantee at 4. Where if you see him as like hand him the ball and let him make a trillion decisions a game guy, you naturally are going to want to put him at 4. I think that the common consensus was the latter, but I mean I'm very much in the former camp of like you need to have a primary ball handler next to him at all times. This pick was so interesting because like Toronto is a very tight-lipped organization, or like even worse than tight-lipped. They don't say nothing, but the things that they say kind of come with the Cheshire grin. So there'll be some small leaks, but they feel very controlled. And you're left to sort of figure out, like, do I know that because it's true, or do I know that because they think that I think it's true? So they think that if they tell me the lies, I'll believe that it's true. And you're like, this is too much. And that's the worst place to be in. That's it. That's obviously how a lot of good organizations operate. Is just like sometimes telling you the truth, and then you overthink it. So when they went with Scottie, I mean, my first concern was like, is Pascal on this team next year? is Kyle Lowry on this team next year? Because I think that the fit isn't necessarily a problem. I don't even think that the developmental fit, like thinking about him for the first 3 years, is necessarily a problem. But it is important when you're thinking about like what exactly is it that you want him to do if you also have two versatile forwards playing next to him most of the time. If it's one and it's OG, that's pretty easy to understand. OG will have much more of a creation role. Scotty will be more of a connector. But if he's the third, it's not that it's hard. It's just that you probably want him to be more of a connector, do more flashing and processing in small doses. Don't really think there's like an overlap in terms of like usages. I mean, Scotty's jumper is going to be difficult, or going to have like some difficulty translating. But I think that using him as a post flashes guy, or running some second side snub pick and roll, and you can do a whole bunch of really fun stuff. But not knowing who's going to be on this team does make the initial projection and the initial role sort of hard to think about, because so much seems to be in flux other than OG Anunoby and Fleet.
It's a messy team construction right now, especially, as you say, with so much in flux. Short plug, later on in the week, Henry Ward will be coming on to discuss team building, kind of with what the Raptors might be going for. So
I also assume I assume there's also going to be some David Johnson talk.
There will be David Johnson talk, yes, for sure. Interesting player. But okay, let's get to the standout aspects of Scotty's game. He's the number 4 pick, and selecting that high, there should be several standouts. As you said with Jalen Suggs, connector more than primary. People who listen to the definitive Jalen Suggs podcast I did with Jackson Frank, you would have got that from us as well. Scotty Barnes, though, goes number 4. What are the major points of emphasis in his game that make him shoot up a draft board with so much momentum late and land in an organization that values those kinds of things?
I mean, I think you start with approach first. Scotty has always been a extremely high energy, high intensity, high communication player. He's a guy who needs to make noise, needs to clap, needs to, jump up and down, needs to touch the rim. Like, those are the things that get him going. And that's, for a team that just played a year in Tampa, a guy who like so visibly loves basketball, like can be a nice change of pace. Like at the end of the day, this is a job, but somebody who just like truly loves it and like enjoys nothing more than throwing down a dunk and then clapping in someone's face for about 5 seconds. That can bring a lot of joy to a team. And you'll, as the NBA has loosened its bench celebration restrictions, you can see how much that like really gets people going to celebrate the achievement of others. And that's not like, fluffy stuff. It's like on defense, if you sit close or, you sit at a summer league game, you can hear him from like row 50. He's just shouting like rotation, drop. Like you hear everything he has to say on defense. And for a rookie, that's a true standout, because like most rookies know what they're doing on defense, but they can't communicate multiple positions at once. Part of that is, the way he's wired. Other parts of that are his experiences with Team USA in the youth sector, and also going to Montford. And then finally he finished at Florida State, which is a place known for really nailing down the specifics of defensive responsibility. Patrick Williams, who went number 4 to the Bulls last year, went to Florida State for that exact reason, that he wanted to establish, his communication, his rotation, and like the minutia of defense as a fundamental part of his game. And he knew at other places he could shoot, but he wanted to get that down. Scotty's kind of like the perfect embodiment of a lot of those ideas. And I think that if you just showed him to like people and you ask like what he's good at, you'd just be like, vibes. Like the vibes are awesome. And like that's not nothing. Like you can tell how much he enjoys defense, how much he enjoys communication, and like that energy to play hard basically every possession he's on the floor is a viable ability.
Okay, and so let's discuss the playmaking then. You can see a lot of broken playmaking. You can see a lot of transition playmaking, and just he makes good reads off the bounce, especially for his position. Came off the bench, Florida State. A lot of possessions as a primary for that style of basketball. What do you make of his playmaking so far? Because, with fans, you can always get he's Magic Johnson because he's big and he passes the ball. Or you could get, we don't have a guy who can even dribble. Like, what do you find the range is for him there?
I would say that he processes the game extremely well. He's always been a guy who recognizes advantages and has a very good schematic understanding of what the defense is trying to take away. So he often makes the most dangerous pass in a particular situation. I think that Toronto, like I have long been a believer in OG as a star and as a primary creator, like a person who can create a primary load of shots. So I think that like as long as you're playing against a tilted defense, like Scotty's reads really will stand out because his handle is a struggle from a primary aspect. It's fine, especially in transition. He gets up to full speed. He has long strides. But in the half court, where his athleticism and his handle, like areas of his game, they're just like not good, are really important to like sculpt so that the weaknesses don't come through so much. I think that he can run pick and roll. You just have to divide. Like every pick and roll should be sculpted. It should never just be like 1-4 flat. It should be on a Nick screen, on a snug pick and roll, coming off a secondary action, flow into something, because he sets up screens well. He has an understanding of the angles. He has an understanding of the defense, but his ability to create advantage on his own is limited by his athleticism and his handle intersection right now. In transition, its own different thing, but in the half court, it is going to be something that needs to be schemed for specifically.
What you said about OG, we're probably going to steal time from Champagne as far as the conversation at the end of this podcast. I want to ask you more about that. But okay, handle. Jalen Suggs, very within himself, it speaks to being able to manipulate and to, create larger advantages off the bounce. What do you make of Scotty Barnes' handle, how it might develop and where it's at currently?
Yeah, I think it's a flexibility thing mostly. He has really long arms, which is a gift and a curse as a handle. Because like if you have really, really long arms, it just takes so long from the ball to get to 1 foot fully. Like if you go out of a hang dribble and it's all the way out, like that ball is 5 feet away from your center of gravity, then you have to go across and it gets all the way over to the other hand. But it is a longer process. It's often like why big guys get ripped a lot is because there's so much distance from the ball bouncing to the floor. It gives a lot of time for your small guards to get underneath and get it before it bounces back up to your hand. Flexibility is going to be a huge concern. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle. Oftentimes he just creates a smaller advantage and then outstrengths his way to the rim. In the NBA, it's going to be less feasible. It's also in the NBA, teams are going to be able to force him to shoot more. He took steps in the right direction in terms of like attempts. I think that he sort of had negative development on his jumper since his sophomore year of high school, where he was taking shots off the dribble. I think that there's the flexibility, the energy transfer that you see in his handle is also present in his jumper, which looks stiff. Like it just doesn't look like a dude who's comfortable shooting. He looks like a dude who's thinking about shooting a basketball and trying to sort of like memorize the steps. As a bad dancer, it looks like somebody who's trying to think of, okay, so it's up, it's left, then it's right there. There's a side step. Wait, no, it's up, then it's right. Then that's what it feels like him shooting. When he shoots best, it looks so much different. It looks like a confident dancer, but that rigidity to me speaks to his readjustment of his shooting as over the years and trying to figure out what's most comfortable for him.
If you were scheming to, not that he's going to call for a lot of that early on in his career, but if you're scheming to mitigate his strengths, what would you be trying to throw at him?
I would just go under every screen. I would go under every screen and then force him to throw like weak side skips. It's not something that he can't do. It's just that like when you say like, okay, you're not getting any pass but that pass, it allows pre-rotation to the corner. So it allows everybody to know this is what's happening next. He's a guy who I would like to see volume as a big deal. Volume over percentages. Like I'm fine if he shoots 28% from 3 a game his rookie year. That would not be a concern for me. If it's on a 1 attempt a game, like there's a problem. If it's on 3.5 or 4, we're in a good place because at least he's recognizing open shots. He perceives them as good shots for him. He's a good to great guy. This happens pretty commonly for guys who were raised in very winning situations where they have a little bit of what we in the scouting community call academy brain, where they do what's best for the team at all times. And if you're a bad shooter, you shooting is bad for the team. And so they pass up open shots, which would be a great shot for anybody else, but they, have some worries. And I would like him to just turn those worries out and get shots up. Obviously, there's going to be adjustments as he gets into the NBA. It's not in a particularly great place right now. Like I'm not going to lie to you. The flexibility is going to be important, but more than anything, it is the rhythm. The release looks fine. It's the middle part of the jumper that I would say is an issue. I think that's probably like, I mean, I can go deeper into the jumper as we go. I don't think he's super comfortable shooting off the bounce consistently. Like he'll take a couple here and there, but it's not, the process is very dependent on how he felt on a day-to-day basis. Footwork's okay, not phenomenal. I think a lot of this has to go with like he can't get shots off that quickly, both because of his handle, because of like the way that the rhythm of his jumper is, but also because like his athleticism is particularly non-reactive. So like he struggles to like hop 3 times quickly in a row. It takes him a moment to load each time. And so like, if he's doing a hang dribble to a side step, the hang, a little bit of a gather delay, side step, gather delay, and then shot, gather delay. So that power generation, he can generate a lot of power, but at times it can take him too long to do so. And since, basketball is a game of timing windows, if you're a little too late, then like, there's a dude with a 7'7" wingspan who's just flown in and gotten a fingertip to it, or even worse, scared you out of taking that shot. So now you're closely covered, you've pump faked him, like everybody on defense knows what's happening.
Okay, 2 questions. Who is the best player with academy brain in the NBA? And then 2, Scotty Barnes, you talked about how you go under and then you use pre-rotation to mitigate the advantage of the pass he's making. How does he pass against pre-rotation? Does he outfox the defense when stuff like that happens? So those 2 cues.
Okay. The best player with academy brain. I mean, like at times it's probably Patty Mills. The thing is that you can grow out of academy brain. Like we've seen this with guys who, like some guys do, some guys don't. Some guys just find a role that is much more clear for them. Like it's not a flat thing of like, I'll do what's best for the team. It's like for some guys, it comes to shooting. Other guys, it comes from like they struggle to not do more than shoot. Like academy brain affects different players differently. So for some guys, like they can minimize their academy brain by going to a role that's a little more comfortable for them. So you'll find this in like 2nd or 3rd draft guys where they bounce around the league a little bit and suddenly they're in a spot that looks perfect for them. Danny Green, probably a good case for this. He bounced around a little more than a couple teams, but we find something like that. And then you have guys who like overcome it. I think like Killian is going through this right now. Frank Ntilikina is going through this right now. It's not that this just affects French players or overseas players. You'll see this with Americans, and we have quite a few Americans in this specific class that have academy brain. Springer being another one who also went to usually it's just like, did you play for a really good high school? Did they systematize reads? Are you always hunting for advantage? And that leads to guys who, if you can't shoot, can struggle to deal with the cognitive dissonance of like, I have an open shot, but I'm shooting it.
Okay. And as far as Scotty Barnes and
the rotation.
Yeah.
So I think that he gets it, but he can like getting to a situation where you have to outfox the defense on the same read over and over again is a failure unto itself. Like you're playing a game with you're playing a casino game at that point where like they already have the advantage. They know what's happening and they can always just throw more defenders and more looks. They have more options than you probably have counters, because like even if they start pre-Xing out or they stunt and recover, or they sometimes it was like won't send anybody to the corner to see what you do, to force it and force a long rotation. But like at the end of the day, you keep going back to that read instead of doing the thing that actually breaks the coverage, which is like shooting through it.
Mm-hmm.
Or rescreening, or like finding a way to get 2 in the paint. The solution isn't with the pass necessarily. Sometimes like it can be with the pass as an outcome, but you have to change your approach to make a defense change its approach, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then before we get to defense, 2 feet in the paint, downhill momentum, what is the, finishing craft, foul drawing craft, passing in the interior? Like, does he have the wraparound? Does he have the dump off? All this kind of stuff. Could he throw a lob on the short roll?
Yeah. I feel like that's probably his best style of passing. Are these like little, like, because he has really long arms, he can throw some really weird angles. So like his dump off is really low. For a dude who's like 6'7", 6'8". I think the thing that's going to be difficult is that like he does not have vertical pop, and he's one of the guys who tanked his standing reach to get a higher vertical number at the combine. So like I think he tested like 38, 37, which like he's probably closer to like 34, 33. And on his film, you can see that he really struggles to generate power quickly. So like if you think about like the best dude in the world at this is Marvin Bagley. Like Marvin Bagley's feet touch the ground, and his second jump is both lightning quick and gets as high as his first jump. And Scotty doesn't have that ability. He needs a lot of time to load, and he can't get as high the second time. Or, you know, if it's off a drop step, then he can't get as high the first time because it's the same, you know, power coordination. It's just not, you know, involving a second jump. But I think he has some finishing craft. He's not like a full extension guy. The problem is that he doesn't have a bunch of finishing variety because he can't go over the top. If you see, like, if you watch his dunk highlight reel, you'll notice it's a lot of length dunks. And sometimes he does a length dunk and then like grabs and rips the rim. So it looks a lot like tougher than it is. I think that attaching flexibility and attaching extra like quick twitch athleticism is going to be really important for his finishing, because it does limit his use as a 5 and it does limit his use as a flasher, because he will need extra craft. He will need weird finishing angles. He will need, you know, multiple finishing styles, because he can't just like go up and get it.
Do you have a reference point for a player that's done that in the past?
In regards to just like adding a lot of weird stuff?
Yeah, really refining the quick twitch stuff and kind of putting it into their game.
I mean, like if I had to say, like, I think there's two different things there. Like if it's for the just adding weirdness, like Boris Diaw is an example. Like Boris started his, you know, his basketball life as a point guard. Then he was super athletic, and then he became a wine lover, and then he became super effective. Like it's a hilarious journey, but like you could, like, he has every finish. He's super strong. He could jump 40 on, you know, if you put him up on the rack, but you didn't see that in games because he found so much of his effectiveness not from using his particular, like his strangely awesome athleticism, but from, you know, finding unique angles from guys that have improved their bounce. I feel like Jakob Partel did, especially later in his career. That's a much more difficult list of guys. It feels like you generally get marginally better. I don't think there's like, especially for guys that have been as a lot of guys who do get better come from sort of like the Pascal life track, where it's like, you know, I didn't play basketball my entire life. I was in a low D1 program. I was off a national team radar. Like Scotty's been on the national team radar since he was like 14 years old. Like he's gotten the best training in the world basically for the past like 5 or 6 years. So the idea that like he's going to be exposed to some new training techniques is kind of difficult for me. I don't want to say his body is maxed out, but like those things have definitely been explored. And there might not be as much, like there's going to be quite a bit of athletic upside just, you know, because of his frame. But the idea that there's like this, you know, the priors are about as bona fide as they could possibly be, just from athletic testing and performance aspect.
Excellent. Let's do quick jump shot doctor for Scotty Barnes. And I guess we'll start with catch and shoot stuff. A lack of dip, rigidity, something you talked about, but do you see a blueprint for improvement? And it doesn't have to be rapid, incredible improvement, but just improvement.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with the feet. I don't love his rhythm. I don't think he has to be a hop guy. I don't think it would hurt. Sometimes it feels like his rhythm alters how much legs are in his jumper. He has a tendency of overarming. I mean, if you just sort of divide the body in half, ideally you want it to kind of be 50-50. He's probably going to be a guy who moves towards a 1.5 jumper. He was he's been a 2-motion guy up until college, and I feel like he started to smooth it out, but it's going to be a multi-year process. You know, most guys, it requires a calendar year of smoothing from 2 to 1.5 or 2 to 1. That's a good outcome. I'd say like 2 years is pretty normal to get to add in results. I would say stabilizing feet. I don't really have an opinion on no dip versus dip. I generally like guys who dip, just because, especially if you're a 1-2 guy, you just need something that establishes rhythm and flexibility are the general biggest concerns with Scotty. The release itself looks okay. I feel like it's pretty consistent looking. Some hand placement issues, but like these are minor things. Like hand placement issues generally don't turn you from like a 25% shooter to a 40% shooter. It's usually there's underlying things like hand-eye coordination, proprioception that are the ability to create rhythm. Like those things are the things that cause you to miss jumpers. It's not like, oh, your thumb's in the way. For the most part, if that was just the issue, somebody would have said it and it would have been fixed.
Okay. So to put a pin in the offense, for a fan who's watching the game, what we're most likely going to see him have the most success with, it sounds like, is a second side pick and roll where he can get downhill, maybe flash passing chops, short rolling, and transition. Do you think that's a fair summary of what we might expect to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you might have some with like high pick and roll, but it wouldn't be like he's not a lob catcher right now. It would be like to get him to clear out into a second side pick and roll. So like he'd run the pick and roll, they'd clear him out, and then his man would relocate a little bit. Then that can flow into like I think that his frame is obviously ideal for setting screens. Like he's a huge person, but the idea of him as a lob catcher is like sort of not realistic. Like he's not PJ Washington who can like really get up or anything like that. That's still going to be a while away. And I think that like there are some misunderstandings of how his athleticism works, which I'm sure we'll talk about with his defense.
I would like to combine he and Daniel Gafford, because Gafford has a lot of pop to me, like that upwards pop.
Yeah.
That would be really fun if you could do that. Okay, let's do defense. I want to bring up, because I want to talk about 1 through 5. And is that a real thing? Because Raptors fans, if you go into Twitter replies about defending 1 through 5, they will probably assert that OG is the best at it in the league, but even he can only guard certain aspects of the center's game. And he had really good success doing so against Daniel Tice, who is extremely small for the center position. And, he had great games against Nikola Jokic, but that's being a hawk above the break where they're trying to, establish a possession, and he's stealing point to wing or wing to point passes, but down on the block, Jokic was getting everything he wanted. So what is your thoughts on 1 through 5? Do players often get there? And if so, does Scottie fit that?
Yeah, I'd say nobody's that. 1 through 5 is a fun idea. Because like every position has its own, like, is 1 through 5 mean that you are comfortable switching onto like De'Aaron Fox? Does it like,
right.
And also you can take post touches where you win against Joel Embiid. The player that you're describing appears to be God. Like that, just like that dude doesn't exist. Like prime Braun is essentially like, and prime Braun giving 100% could probably do those things for like 10 positions. So like switching 1 through, like being a 1 through 5 guy is, I think, needs to be clarified on what people mean. Because like if what you mean is that there are certain matchups where you are capable of guarding ones. Like there, if you play a team with a bigger body point guard, like if you play, wherever Kyle Lowry signs it, I think it's a foregone conclusion he's kind of gone. Say he signs with the Mavs. If you're playing the Mavs, like could you switch on to Kyle Lowry? Probably. Does that make you 1 through 5? No, because Kyle Lowry is slower than the average one. He's a little bit older. Yes, there are obviously challenges with him getting by you because his unique lower body strength and shooting gravity. But is that standard? And then for 5s, like if you guard the smallest 5, does that mean you can guard 5s? I think that what people generally mean when they say guard 1 through 5 is like that a player has positional versatility and could plug into different places. Like they have some point of attack stuff. They have
like
some
7 seconds are left on the shot clock and you switch out and like it's not going to be a disaster.
Yeah, I think like switch everything guys is like really interesting because it's like, oh yeah, this guy could, he can switch everything. I'm like, on who? Like switch everything on everybody? Because like that's not realistic. Like there's no 5 you feel comfortable with on an island against Zach LaVine. That's not a dude. Like even Draymond, you're like, this is not ideal. We have failed in this position if this is happening. Similarly, there's no wing that you like. Joel Embiid gets a post touch on them, and you're like, yeah, we're great. Don't send help. So I think that clarifying scheme, clarifying, what it is that needs to happen. So like, like I think Scotty specifically is interesting because I don't think Scotty is a front side wing rim protector. That eliminates your ability to play 5 in many lineups unless you're playing with a 4 who's a great rim protector. But that means that like you're not really playing the 5. You kind of have a 4.5 and a 4. But the 4 is such a good weak side rim protector that it, these ideas of playing 1 through 5 are interesting, but they exist in a contextual requirement.
Okay, so my number one question, or sorry, I might have cut you off there.
No, I was just you're good.
Okay, so my number one question is, this is something Polar talked about at Skyfall for those who want to look up biomechanics on Twitter. But something he talked about was how what we see with Scotty picking, college guards up, it might not translate to the NBA at the same level because of his style of athleticism, because of the advantageous parts of his athleticism and the parts that haven't come along as much. You alluded to it with front side rim protection. Do you think that it's viable at all for him to kind of emulate the defensive profile that he had at Florida State in the NBA? And if not the whole thing, what aspects do you expect him to succeed at in the NBA?
So like Scotty's point of attack style doesn't seem like it'll transfer to me a ton against guards, because what he did is he overwhelmed them. He found the ball handler that had the shoddiest handle or was the least comfortable, and he's crowded them. And in the NBA, players get used to being defended by guys with these monster wingspans who can cover ground and get their hands on anything. And in college, you just don't see that often. Even in the ACC, there's just not a bunch of dudes who are 6'8" who will slide with you.
You get locked in the knees.
Yeah. So he very much hunts weakness in guards, and that's just not. There's not that many NBA players who fit that mold. So I think that some of his switching onto guards is not will work, but it's going to work. It's second units and specific ones where maybe a guard is struggles with passing reads, and he's able to overwhelm them, and they don't see even the cursory ones. That's feasible, but the idea of you're good if there's a 1-4 pick and roll and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is coming off of it, you're in a bad spot. That's not going to work out because if you crowd Shai's handle, he walks by you. So I think that Scotty does have good horizontal athleticism. He moves his feet well. He covers distance. He can change direction pretty good. He has the arms to cover up mistakes in any technique that he has. But I think that he's going to have to relearn what's possible because his tendency is to get aggressive. And in the NBA, if you're aggressive with the wrong guys, they cook you. Because that finding weaknesses isn't going to happen. I don't mean this to say he is a lesser prospect because of it. It's just that his tendencies have to alter to be more of a mirror guy. I think Kawhi had this issue at San Diego State where he just wanted Drew Holiday had this issue where they just hunted people's handle. The minute that you exposed it, they ripped it from you. And in the NBA, that's just not with Kawhi, things like Macklemore will happen where you find a guy with a weak handle and you rip him, 2 times in a row real bad. But for the most part, dudes handles are Teflon. So him being more of a mirror guy, yeah, it's going to take some tendency adjustment, but that's extremely valuable. You don't have to rip guys every time down. That's just not how the NBA works. That being said, if he can't overwhelm people, you probably don't want him on ones. You probably want him to take 2 through the heavier 4s. You probably don't want him on the super skinny 4s because they can shift him out of the way.
Excellent. Okay, and so if we're looking for what he's going to succeed at, particularly in the framework of the Raptors defense, Pascal Siakam is a guy who made his name, and he became much better at front side rim protection than I think a lot of people might have expected. But he made his name on court coverage. What do you think of Scotty Barnes' projection as a court coverage defender?
I think that that's probably his best role. Because also as a court coverage guy, he's an extraordinary communicator. And the better communicator somebody is, the farther back you want them on the defense. This is why so many young bigs struggle with adjustments to the league. Is that in the league, the 5 is the communicator. And so your job isn't just to talk through what's happening point of attack. It's to talk through every action on the floor simultaneously and cover your dude who, if you miss by a half step, a lob goes up and you get dunked on. That's a really difficult assignment. And if you put him on the weak side corner and you have him next to a rim protector, then he can call out everything and give you two, high level communicators on the floor at the same time. He's going to have some navigation issues if teams target him to, get skinny through screens. Like he'll certainly energy his way through it, but he's not, he's not McCall where he's like capable. He's not McCall or Matisse or anything where like off ball there at heaven. It's more that he has good foot placement. He understands where he has to be, but he does have some circumstances where he just doesn't have the frame for moving in multiple directions, successively. If you play Boston, like you don't want him on Tatum because they'll just put him through screen, the screen maze, and he's going to have some issues navigating it.
Okay. And with all those things considered, is there an outcome 50, 75, 85 that you're expecting for his defense? I know it's tough to put like a percentile outcome into defense since there's not really any defensive awards outside of, all defense and defensive player of the year. But is there something you think he can punch up at?
I mean, it really depends on how he handles like his improvement. If he gets more flexible, then we get a different archetype of guys he can handle. If he gets like to above average, if he gets to average pop right now, I would say he's like somewhere between far below and below average for a strong side rim protector. Then you can have him be the front side rim protector. I think that I have very little doubt that Scotty will be a very good defender. It's just targeting what he does well because he does have specific limitations, just like literally everybody does. Like Kawhi struggles with super shifty dudes. Like that's probably the best defender of my generation.
Okay. Okay, and then so let's discuss just as far as philosophy. Bobby Webster, when he was talking about the draft pick, he talked about having a bunch of guys who are of a similar size and build to OG and Siakam. Like have 5 of those guys out on the floor at once. What do you think of that? Just that in itself, and having a GM say that.
I mean, it's certainly a fun concept, but like one of the important things is different movement styles. Like OG moves kind of similar to Scotty. Like Scotty isn't as rangy in terms of movement. Like he's, his steps are a little bit shorter. He likes to hop up and down more. Where like OG, just all long strides. Like it sort of feels like everything's in that like 1950s animation style where the legs go on forever. And Siakam, I've always said like moves around like he's covered in petroleum jelly. Like I think that you can have guys who are similar size and a similar build, but they all can't move the same because then they have all the same defensive utility. So having guys who are all 6'9", but one of them, is really like kind of jitterbuggy. I know it's difficult to imagine a 6'9" jitterbug, but this sort of movement style. One guy that's a little bit on like the lankier, stridey side, one that's a little bit more on the football player build. That all makes a lot of sense to me. They also have different skills. Like, I mean, if you have 0 advantage creators and 5, 6'9" dudes, it's just going to be ball reversals until somebody jacks up a 17-footer. We've seen teams try to do that, obviously at lower talent levels, and like it struggles because one of them doesn't have the primary creator moveset and necessities. I think as a team building philosophy, it makes a lot of sense. I also think it explains some of the later picks, and one of the specific gripes that I have about one of the second round picks. But the idea that like if you can definitely build a very good defense out of this, and the offense, as long as they're good processors, and at least 3 of them are good shooters, will certainly hold its own weight as well.
And just for the listener, this will be expanded upon with Henry Ward in a few days. But it is really interesting. But that is the point I think that you bring up is ball reversals until you get the contested 17-footer. Who is breaking down the defense when you look at the Raptors roster and creating that big advantage? And if you're thinking, well, I saw Fred VanVleet get downhill and create a 3-point shot, 380 times last year. Yes, but what was the quality of the 3-point shot? How in tune, we talked about counters to the type of advantage you're creating earlier on with, outfoxing the defense. Fred was good at finding the guys forming up. The guys formed up so that the pass was available to be made. But a lot of the time, the ball was just going from the top of the floor to the sideline. And the Raptors need more solid advantage creation than that, typically. But we'll get into that more, I guess, when we talk about the second round guys a little bit. Okay, Scotty Barnes, expected outcomes, judging from what you know and what you think is the most, expedient and easiest things to progress with in the NBA, according to his archetype. What are the outcomes you kind of think that we might see from Scotty Barnes, even if it's the 30%, the 50, the 75, the 90, because if we look at Pascal Siakam, he's probably sitting at a really high percentile of his outcome.
Yeah, I would say 90. I would say like 99th percentile.
Right, according to what he was drafted at. OG Anunoby is also sitting at a decently high percentile. We'll talk about what that might become at the back end of the podcast, though. But for Scotty, what do you see, and what might you think it'll become?
So I said that there's kind of like, I think that there's two pretty, like, let's take the two like meatiest outcomes. Obviously there's like there's the very tail end where it's like either he, completely forgets how to shoot and becomes a negligible offensive player, or he really, really, really learns how to shoot. And, then we're talking about something entirely different. Okay. We've talked about those. They're out of the way. I think the lower end outcome for him, which kind of covers like 50% and down, is like a very good rotational player who is on defense, who can, bounce between responsibilities well, who's capable of getting in passing lanes, who's his best in transition, and processes the floor very well, even if he can't create his own advantage. That's a playoff rotation player basically automatically. And if you can build even lineups around him where there's enough shooting and enough advantage creation, then it's probably a playoff starter. Like I would say those are like 50% to like 30% outcomes. Let's say 50 to 80%. So like these would be what we would probably classify as good. I mean, all of these are, I think that there's very little chance that Scotty Barnes is not like a meaningful playoff player, but I would say a good chance is that he shoots open jumpers. He does all those things, and he has the explosiveness and flexibility to navigate screens and protect a player. Then you have a player who is extraordinarily valuable in the playoffs, can probably play some 5, which like I do not think he can do right now. Because like, again, if somebody else is covering your, like if it requires a specific instruction, you kind of can't play that position. You're kind of just like, I don't want to say Potemkin center, but like you're sort of halfway doing a role and somebody else is replacing, there's an offset that's not like, it limits team construction in a way that, like if you could straight up play the 5, it would be different. If he could play the 5 and navigate screens well enough to like guard 2s, I don't ever want him on 1s unless it's like straight up backup point guards that you just want him to harass for 94 feet just for like funsies. Which like I think you could at Summer League I would just have him do that for fun, just to be like, we want you to feel comfortable, and that will definitely get his engine revving. But like, yeah, I think both of those are meaningful or better players. I don't think that he like will ever become like a star in the traditional sense, or like his mixtapes are amazing. But like, if you think about upside in the sense of like, will this player win All-Star Game MVP? He doesn't necessarily have any. But if you think of upside of like, will this player help us win playoff games? Like team upside, will this player like make us proud to wear the jerseys and as fans? He has a ton, and like, there are bad players who fit that first category. Like they're like, your teams are still bad. The guy averages 36 points a game. It's like, you probably aren't having fun. Like you remember that playoff run? Would you call that fun? It seems like it was a lot of fun. Scotty is sort of a vision of a very winning player, which like seems like faint praise because like a lot of people want the fun guy. And sometimes they coexist, but like Kawhi wasn't necessarily a fun basketball player. He just did a lot of winning stuff and
just was a fun guy.
Yeah. And, I think Scotty exists in that same vein. It's just like with more clapping and vibes and enjoying outwardly.
Okay, there's one thing I do want to ask about because I know some of the listeners are going to be disaffected by you saying you don't want Scotty on a one ever, because Raptors fans have seen Pascal Siakam take John Wall as a primary in a playoff series. They've seen Pascal Siakam as the primary for Russell Westbrook in regular season games against the Westbrook and George Thunder. What is the difference mainly between Scotty and Pascal that you could get away with Pascal playing defense in those roles, and it's why you don't think Scotty can?
Reactive movement skills. Also, like Pascal's a mirror, who like has really good reactive athleticism. Like Pascal can, shift his feet 3 or 4 times and still get a good contest on people, and still like he can get beat and recover. And Scotty's just not that kind of, like, he's not that style of athlete. I don't want to say kind because like athleticism, people like hear different things. So I'm trying to be really specific with the words, but like the idea is that like styles of athleticism, the style that Scotty moves is not perfect for the hyper athletic ones. Like Ja Morant is like hard no. Never ever would I want him on Ja, because Ja moves in a way that Scotty just like kind of can't. Whereas like more twos that are less like jitterbuggy and more smooth would be good.
Like DeMar.
Yeah.
DeMar is not a jitterbug.
Yeah. I mean, like even Beal, I think he could do. I think he would be much better on like a Beal style. I think Beal might be a touch on the outside fringe, but like in the archetype of Beal, where it's like Beal wins more with smooth than with like bap bap and gone. And so like at a lower level of that, I feel like you would be okay with Scotty, but like Ja would be like a ask for a different assignment kind of situation.
Okay,
I think you would want to guard Ja. I think, to be honest, arguing this with Scotty, I cannot imagine being the person who's like, "Hey, you can't guard him." But that seems like a terrible job. You have to find the most charismatic guy on staff to convince him that actually this other job is more important, because he's going to be like, "No, I want to guard him. I want to put him give me him on an island." You're like, "No, Scotty. Hey, this off-ball role is so much more important." Like, think about it. Like, that's the mainstream movie. Like, I'm over here, like, this is the art house role, like this is the one people are like, you're going to get awards. He's like, no, but I want the don't envy the person who has to tell him that.
Yeah. I did want to dig in a little bit, because Raptors fans, from what I'm seeing, from what I'm hearing, have been sold on the 1 through 5 and have seen the clips of him eating up college point guards. So they might be disaffected hearing that you don't want him guarding the 1. So I just wanted you to make like a very specific case. And personally, I'm very happy with that case. But okay, let's do some Twitter questions regarding Scotty Barnes, if that works with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. From Jeff Lowe, what's a realistic expectation for Barnes in year 1? And you can parse that. I'll give my own after you, and you can parse it out in what. Yeah.
I would say a realistic expectation is struggles with shooting volume, has like really interesting feel flashes, and like looks like an adult on defense. Like, won't look like a rookie in terms of scheme, but will have moments where he tries to challenge, like literally what we just talked about, where he tries to challenge a little bit outside of his physical limitation, and like will look like a bad defender because he's not being optimized in that moment. So like, I think he's going to have to learn the hard way that he can't switch on to ones. And he's going to learn the hard way that he is not a primary rim protector. So like, I think if he learns those lessons and that like starts to fix the shooting volume, then we're in a good place for, like, that's a good rookie year. Learning those lessons and starting to fix the shooting volume, good rookie year. Nothing else really matters to me.
Yeah, for myself, I think if I can offer a little bit of a different view than PD, Raptors fans, every fan base is a little bit more in tune to certain parts of the on-court flow and feel because of what they've been subjected to from their team. Raptors fans are a little bit more conscientious in noticing, hey, this is really strong movement across the back end of the court. Like, oh, what's the court coverage here? Like, oh, wow, an X out. Maybe not an X out for every Raptors fan, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But Scotty Barnes will probably get a lot of positive attention from writers and from fans for his court coverage, and there'll be a lot of clips, tracking him, like, look where he started. He's got 2 closeouts, and then he recovered to the corner for, a block or something like that. And I think fans will really appreciate that about him. There's going to be quite a few really fun pop plays in transition, whether that's him finishing or whether that's him with like a no-look, live dribble pass to a guy coming in from another lane. I think that stuff will be there, but I don't think there's like a rookie of the year case to be made here. And, I think it would be quite an accomplishment within the framework of like how many good players there are coming out of the draft. If he was first team all rookie, I think that would be a tremendous outcome for him, but maybe that's not in the cards. But lots of fun things at the very least. PD said before and quite a few times in this podcast, vibes. So yeah, I think that's a good answer for that. You're welcome for letting you go first, PD. But okay, we have the Freddie Gillespie fan club at Pack Attack, who has been on this podcast before. Quote, given the Raptors' track record of getting guys to improve macro skills like ball handling and shooting, what micro skills does Scottie really need to address to outperform his projection? Additionally, what issues of his are/aren't masked by this current iteration of the Raptors? End quote. Okay, that's for you. That's not really for me, PD, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, it's so wild how you picked all the questions that I have to answer first. Coincidence, I think. So I don't think that there's I think the macro skills are the micro skills. Like the thing with Scottie is that he's here because all the micro skills are like pretty great. Like, yeah, you'd want some finishing craft improvements, especially as like a flasher, or, if he's going to run second side pick and roll, you're going to need stuff there. But like, it's also important to note that the Raptors coaching staff that is lauded for shooting and handle development isn't there anymore. Like, it is in parts, but like the brain drain has officially begun, and assuming that things in the past will hold to the future isn't necessarily a sound decision-making isn't a sound reasoning, because like with every win you get, you have one more eye looking to like, how'd they do that? Hey, can we get him over here? So I don't think you can assume the same rate of development. Also, every player is different. But like, again, I think that he has it's the movement skills laterally to try to get more fluid. It's the flexibility to add wider ranges of motion. It's the explosiveness to pop, and then just shooting and handle. Like it is the macro, and the micro stuff is I would say more body based and optimization based. But yeah, a lot of the little stuff is the stuff that's the best.
Okay. Yeah, I can't really add much to that, but I'll go first on this next one. How concerned we should be about, and this is from Bulat Guzman at Oren Brooklyn. Quote, how concerned we should be about rim protection and defensive rebounding with Siakam, Barnes both on the court, end quote. Yeah, I think extremely concerned, but that's probably not the end goal of that lineup. If that lineup is out there, you're trying to create a lot of turnovers, you're trying to create a lot of certain types of shots, and you actually want to not let the ball get to the rim. You want to be able to stonewall and be very switchable and stuff on the outside. Like, it's not like, a lot of the popular defenses that were played in the playoffs where there's really strong drop going on, and the guy they have dropping is an immense rim protector, and he's eating guys for dinner when they come down into the lane. If you're playing Scottie and Pascal, you're going to struggle immensely on the defensive glass. And probably, even though Pascal, I think, for his position and for his body type, can actually defend the rim quite well. He has a lot of pop getting over there, and his timing appears to be really good. But I still think that's really tough to do. I think you would still, OG is still the nominal, OG and Pascal are switching between the nominal 5 and 4, if that's the case. I don't even think Scottie is fulfilling that role. Do you have any thoughts on that, PD?
Yeah, I think he's going to struggle tremendously, especially when he gets like quick timed. So like, I think that he can strength a lot of like the weaker guys. Like he can stonewall people, but like if he has to meet people at the summit or like go get a ball when it's late, he's just not going to be able to do that because he doesn't have the pop. And I think that there's some misunderstanding about like how his athleticism works. It's not that he's unathletic. It's just that in the way that you would want a rim protector or a play finisher to be athletic, like in specific testing areas, he's really poor, because those are like about, refractory athleticism. How fast can you sprint, hop, and then jump? And yeah, how do you feel about like a Scotty at the 5, Chris Boucher at the 4 lineup?
I don't think Chris Boucher has I don't think he has the court mapping to really move that along. Maybe if he's like really feeling it one day, but I struggle to see that working really well. Yeah. Theoretically, I think you're hitting on something there, though.
Defensively, obviously you'd invert it on offense. But defensively, I mean, the idea being like Scotty sort of like gets vertical and then Boucher is there to clean it up. You would need a hell of a rebounder at the 3. Mm-hmm. Because like Scotty's a solid defensive rebounder for like sort of like the wing forward that he is at an NBA level. He certainly hustles, but like you do not want him to be the primary rebounder, and playing him with Boucher, well, it sounds really fun. Like you're basically going to need a 3 who's like, hey, I need you to be the best 3 rebounder that the world's ever seen. So like, I don't know. I think that there's going to be an adjustment period where people start to realign expectations and also like recognize that like, well, Scotty is a Swiss Army knife. That doesn't mean it's a solution to every lineup. And that like some of these are going to look very funky because like, I don't necessarily want OG covering for him if he's the 5 and OG's the 4. Like, I don't think that that's I think that that's an optimization of Scotty to get Scotty to the 5, but it's not like OG can play ISO. Like you can put OG on an island to be cool. You can't be an island defender and a help side guy. Like that's so much work. And it's offsetting because like what happens if they put like the star in the slot? You can't really help over. What are you supposed to do?
Mm-hmm. That's great point. The cool thing is that while some of this might sound like it's down on Scotty Barnes, a lot of the things that we're listing as positive are things that you'll actually pick up and you'll appreciate. And there are things that are a little bit under talked about as far as how defense works. And a lot of it is just attributed to like, well, it's intangible, but it's partly intangible, but it's partly, Scotty's physical and athletic makeup that will allow him to succeed in ways that fans will realize as the season goes on, and you'll get more accustomed to. I mean, everybody has plays from OG or Pascal or Boucher, and Boucher being, the most fallible defender of all, but they have signature plays, things that you've come to recognize they're very good at. Yuto Watanabe is maybe, one of the best closeout guys in the whole league. So it'll come along, and I think we'll enjoy the defensive prowess of Scotty in a bunch of different ways. Here's something that we kind of addressed, but just a short answer on it since they asked the question. From that_ballplaya, quote, would Scotty ever consider running center one day and point guard the other day, depending on the matchups and roster availability, since he is a player that has the capability of playing 1 through 5? So just if you have a summary on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Scotty is going to be a possessional player 1 through 5. So like there are possessions and there are lineups where like you'd have him be as the strong side one protector and he would initiate offenses against certain coverages against certain teams. But like having him be a full-time point guard is a misallocation of resources because like he's a good like for the style of player he is, he's a good ball handler. So leverage that because like if he's bringing up the ball, like you're just gonna put a guard on him, and like he struggles to create a good guard sometimes. So like I think that one of the benefits of a Swiss Army knife is that there are a lot of mismatches. It's just that like in the NBA, you want to target those mismatches so that they cause advantage. And that advantage doesn't happen 94 feet from the hoop. It doesn't happen putting a guy directly in front of the rim on defense. It happens by targeting moments that can start runs. The runs change the lineup, and then you're comfortable. Like getting a 4-0 run here because you went to a weird, snug pick and roll look. You got a 5-0 run here because you had Scotty at the 5 and you blitzed every pick and roll for 3 possessions and you just turn it off. I think that Nurse is specifically qualified to do a lot of that, where he just like will be like, this is the lineup where we do with this weird thing, and this is the lineup where we do with this weird thing. But the idea of him, sliding between these things, like there's times where he'll bring up the ball to initiate a specific set. That is a fantastic thing for his position. That's a fantastic thing for his versatility. But the idea of him being like Ben Simmons, where it's just like he's the full-time one, and then on defense he does this. I think that is I think that that's a bit aspirational and not in a bad way. Like I think that he is a specific type of fun player. It's just like there's a lot more wrinkles to it than a guy like Ben, who's pretty flat. Like he does 2 things really well, and everything else is kind of question marks. Where Scotty does a lot of things pretty well, and you have to figure out how to maximize that.
And that's often you don't want to send those players into a specific role. You want them to leverage those talents against like sized or, like skilled players, something like that. But I think, that's just because you have point guard skills doesn't mean you go to the one. Like Giannis Antetokounmpo coming out of the draft, everybody was like, oh, he has point guard skills. He could be a 6'9" point guard. And now he's what Giannis is, which is based on his athletic profile at his size, one of the most unique players to ever come into the NBA, and, a finals MVP and an NBA champion. And it has nothing to do with being a point guard. It is almost the exact inverse. So just let players grow and try and develop them. And I don't see him as a one or anything like that.
This is I think I speak for you here when I say this is a pro weirdness podcast, and you want to bring that you want to bring that weirdness to your position rather than being like, oh, instead of being like a point guard who can kind of dribble, you're a 5 who can really dribble. And that like those adjectives slide by position and by usage. And the more weird you can be at your position, the more valuable it is versus like being competent. Like Ben Simmons is like a competent rim runner, but you don't necessarily want to play him at the 5 full time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Row Chicken 1 also asked about Scotty at the point and says, thank you for the pod so far. We answered the Scotty at the point thing, but thank you. I'm glad you appreciate the podcast. Very nice to hear that. Sam from Kate B. Doll. Sam, thanks for this. A question, why is Scotty so perfect? Thanks again. I'll hang up and listen. So this probably just gives us an opportunity to talk about Scotty.
The vibes.
Yeah, the vibes. If you want to lead off on vibes, what you think of Scotty so far? Draft outfits. He was wearing some dunks coming off the plane. Like, what are your thoughts on Scotty, the person?
I mean, the stories you hear behind the scenes about Scotty are just like, seems like the most well-adjusted and like self-aware young man you'll ever see. Like he shakes everybody's hand. He tries to learn as much as he can about like the staffers. He tries to make sure that everybody's having a good time. He's making sure that he's not obtrusive in any way. He's bringing energy to every single practice because one, he needs it, but he knows that like life is better when other people are also smiling. And like he could not clap and have fun, but like why not have fun? I love that he hasn't taken the hat off.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't either if I got drafted. I miss his hair. I would like him to grow his hair back. He used to have like really big hair. Couple like just big twists. When he shaved it going into his senior year, it was really hard to find him because that's just like the only thing I knew him as. I'm hoping it makes a comeback. I think the Dunks are a inferior shoe to a lot of other Nike models. I don't appreciate I appreciate their comeback because I am a Jordan 1 and Blazer guy, and Blazers were hot like 10 years ago. I grabbed a whole bunch of them. I've wrote it out because there's a simple high top, very, a lot of options, but not, it's a classic silhouette. And then about 3 years ago, they jumped off, driving the prices of all the Blazers I hadn't gotten yet really high, frustrating. And so the Dunk came back, and suddenly the interest in the Blazers fallen off. Prices are back normal. I appreciate that. So, I don't own any Dunks. I plan to own any Dunks. I think the Dunks are, the lesser stepchild of a number of Nike silhouettes. I am appreciative of the buzz that they have because it takes the heat off of some of the stuff I do like.
We're almost in the exact same boat. Ones and Blazers to me, that's just it. And Chucks. I like Chucks a lot too. Go ahead.
And they're a little unsupportive.
Yeah, totally.
I just, my feet are jacked from a life of basketball. So I can't quite do it. I'm also not on like the Aspiladra or however you say it, like the cotton shoes. They're basically sandals with like a piece of cloth over top. I can't do those either. Those made a comeback like 5 years ago, and it's just like, look, man, I have some special needs. Just like cover my gnarly feet. Give me a clean, easy look, and just I can mess with some of the high dunks, but every single time I'm like, what I really wish was this is a pair of ones.
Yes.
Like every good dunk, I'm like, you know what this reminds me of? some Chicago ones, or like,
Mhm.
oh, this reminds me of, and the answer is always like a nice pair of Blazers. Though I will say I don't like the double tongue GTs or the double, like the ones with the high gator on them.
Are those the Sakai's?
No, they're the Blazers. You'll see some of the like newer models that kind of have like a second piece of canvas
Mhm.
around the toes. That's a
Okay,
little
yes.
That's a little too busy for me. I feel like they do some weird color blocking there. Just want like a solid color blocking. We can get crazy with colors, but I like it clean and easy throughout the thing. But yeah, dunks are they're a little bit too Diet Coke for me.
I'll never have a dunk. Never will. But I do appreciate the Blazer love. What's your favorite Blazer color? Like what's the do you got the maroons, the UNC blues? Like what's the move for you?
There is a pack from 2008 called the Tech Pack that use a multiple interesting materials. There's one that's like tech fleece, but it's really padded. You have one that's like a suede, and then a third one that is sort of like the same material that like bombers are made out of. Bomber jacket, not planes. So like, yeah, those are my three go-tos that I wear probably the most. Also like the Tods, which are a red and black flannel pair. And I love a tonal shoe generally. Like tonal, if a shoe is tonal and it has some different materials, like I'm very in on that.
My favorite pair of Blazers I have is they came out like maybe a year and a half ago. It's tumbled leather and snakeskin, well, faux snakeskin, but they're red on the inside, blue on the outside swoosh, and that's for me. That's what I like. That's my favorite pair. I also have like I'm a derivative of hype beast culture because I have the CDG Converse because of course, but yeah, Jordan 1s are like everything to me. I also like Jordan 4s a lot.
Yeah, we've talked about. I own one pair of Jordan 4s. I mean, we're here at one, so just like, can I get your two favorite ones? You don't have to own them, just like the ones that you love.
Okay. That's a really good question. I think my favorite pair of ones, I was really, when I first got into shoes, I was really obsessed with the band ones. But I think it's probably Chicago's and the UNC's. I think they're both really classic, and I think that like the UNC is a super fun color pop, and the Chicago's are maybe the most iconic shoe ever outside of Converse, and that's just because Converse is so much cheaper.
Okay, I mean, I can get there. I will say that I really like the Lance Mountain Nest Jordan ones.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Very cool.
This is again another take.
White or black pair?
I like the white pair. I like my shoes worn. Having new shoes gives me an anxiety attack. So the first thing that I look at when I get new shoes is how will they look when they're beat, and getting shoes that age well. So like, nice leather materials that you can just have for like 10 years is important. So like the white black ones, the Lance Mountains in either pair. The Kentuckys are one that I've really warmed on recently. That dark blue.